In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. This week I'm going to first begin about behaviorism, as you see on page 51. Okay, we want to say that what is the difference between a Chomskyan approach, okay, and the behavioristic approach that actually at that time, in fact, Chomsky highly opposed. Chomsky opposed the behaviorists when he wanted to, in fact, introduce his notions of language. To begin with, let us go to page 51, as you see on, in fact, your monitors on your cell phones. Actually, behaviorism was an attempt to describe ilm al-nafs or describe psychology at the beginning of the 20th century, okay, and now it is 21st century, so it was something about 60, 70 years ago at that time. Okay, so at the time that actually first we have the behaviorism, and after that we have Chomsky's reactions to that, because part of your teaching is, in fact, deals with behaviorism, which is a kind of, well, when it is practiced into the field of language teaching, it is the same as audiolingualism. So we have to understand what we mean by behaviorism and the reactions that we have against it by Chomsky. Okay, let us see. Chomsky actually, as you can find on line 1 of page 51, it says, to some extent, Chomsky's ideas are now so taken for granted that their originality has been obscured. Okay, it is obscured now. But if you actually look, you see signs of reactions to behaviorism. For prior to Chomsky's work of the late 50s, language was not considered to be what people knew, but what people behaved, or how people behaved. So, language knowledge, according at that time, was a kind of behavior. Chomsky says, no, it's a kind of knowledge. Okay? So what is the difference between a Chomskyan approach and a behavioristic approach? According to these two lines, you see that Chomskyan the Chomskyan approach is language is considered a kind of knowledge in the minds of the native speakers. Okay? Earlier or prior to this kind of knowledge by Chomsky, everybody thought that language was something like a kind of behavior. So we have to, let's see what we mean by these things. Let us see. So, as incorporated, line 3 and 4, as incorporated in the structural linguistics. So, remember there are a set of, in fact, schools which are highly related. In psychology, we talk about behaviorism. In linguistics, similarly, we talk about structuralism, and in language teaching, we talk about audiolingualism. They are the same. They are in the same line. Repeat it. Behaviorism in psychology is the same as structuralism in linguistics, And this one is again the same as audiolingualism in language teaching. Okay, they are the same. Now Chomsky says no, it's not behaviorism, it's not audiolingualism, it's not structuralism. That's why. Okay, let us see. So earlier, it was like this, that structuralists went and studied the conversations, the everyday speech, in order to find the structures of the English language. And they gave their output. Okay, they gave their output to language teachers. Well, according to structuralism, language teachers developed a model of language teaching according to audiolingualism, and it was like that. Okay, now Chomsky comes to attack this position, to say no, language is not something like a behavior. So it's not like a structuralism in linguistics. As a result, it's not a kind of audiolingualism in language teaching. Let us see. Of course, when we want to talk about these guys, like people in behaviorism, we talk about two people. The first person, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of this page. Okay, paragraph 1 on page 51, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The name is Bloomfield, 1993. Actually, Bloomfield wrote the book called Language. In his book, Bloomfield comes to say what language looks like. Okay? So let us look at the Bloomfield, view of language. The Bloomfield view of language as it is, shown in the book written by him, and the name of the book is Language, line 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Language, Bloomfield, 1933. Line 5 says, Bloomfield saw language acquisition as initiated by the child more or less accidentally. Why does a child develops his mother tongue? According to Bloomfield, it is simply accidental. It is simply accidental. Okay? So the child produces sounds like da, 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 da. Actually, see that children produce these things like the da, 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 da. Okay? These sounds become associated with a particular object, such as a doll, D-O-L-L. When they say da, 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 the mother or the father gives the child something like a doll, okay? D-O-L-L. Line 5, 6, 7. Line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Doll, okay? A kind of toy, okay? Because of the parents' reaction. So when the child says da, 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 the child actually says da, da, da. The mother or the father said, oh, he or she means doll, doll. Let us take the doll to the child. Okay? Let us take the doll to our baby. Okay? So, what happens here? So, as a result of accidentally saying da, 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 the child is given doll. So, the sound da is associated with the meaning of doll, an object. Okay? So, as a result of accidentally producing the sound, I'm just repeating, the child associates something like what? Associates the word doll to the sound, well, the meaning doll to the sound da. Okay, now because language is displaced. Language is displaced. This happens to the child. When the doll is not available, when the child is not available, you can talk about doll. Why? Because language is displaced. What does it mean? You are here. Suppose you are you are suppose somewhere. You think about something else somewhere else. Okay. Why? Because language is displaced. We can talk. This means that we can talk about the things that are not here. Suppose I am in my office in the University of Qom. I can talk about Karbala, far away from here, about 700 kilometers away from, let's say, Qom. I don't know exactly how much it is, of course, with the distance is like this. I can easily talk about Karbala. I can easily talk about Najaf. I can easily talk about, well, Samira. I can easily talk about Baghdad. I can easily talk about things like that. Why? Simply, language is displaced. So we can talk about doll whenever the doll is not available. Okay? So, these are important things. Well, as I told you, accidental. 2, association. 3, displaced speech. And the last but not the least is reinforcement. What does it mean? Any time the child says da, the father or the mother, go and bring the doll available to the child. So why? Because they are going to reinforce this kind of behavior in the child. Okay? So far so good. Bloomfield says that language is behavior. First, the child says da, 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 accidentally. Then, this da is associated with something like a doll. And now, from now on, the child uses da to mean something which is maybe available to him, maybe not. Why? Because language is displaced. Displays speech. We can talk about things that are not here. Okay? Not now, not here. I can talk about things in the past or things in the future. Okay? So why? Because it is a kind of because it is displaced speech, and the result is something like reinforcement. This is the idea of the behaviorist Bloomfield about language. So simply, the child produces something like accidentally produces something, and the result is language. Finished. Paragraph 2 talks about a better version of behaviorism as seen in somebody else called B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner. So, B.F. Skinner is the second person to talk about behaviorism. Well, Bloomfield actually said something about his ideas were actually put into a book called Language in 1933. But now, B.F. Skinner has got another book in 1957, which is quite different from the Bloomfield's book. Line 2 says the name of the book is Verbal Behavior. Verbal Behavior. Okay? And the full name of this person, of course, in the form of abbreviation is B.F. Skinner. Okay? Skinner, 1957. About, I don't know, 24 years after the appearance of Bloomfield's ideas in the book Language. We have something like Verbal Behavior by Skinner. What do you see? You see a better version of behaviorism. Look at the top of the page. It is written behaviorism. Okay? It says a better, in fact, development for the idea of behaviorism. Let us see. For B.F. Skinner, it is something like line 3, something like this. Well, line 3 of paragraph 2. Skinner rejected explanations for language that were inside organism. For Skinner, language is outside, not inside. It is outside an organism like human beings. It's outside, let's say, an organism like a monkey. Okay? It is outside. Where in the society? Outside, not inside the mind. So the mind does not have anything to do with language, according to B.F. Skinner. So line 3 says that Skinner rejected explanations for language that were inside the organism in favor of the explanations in terms of outside conditions. It's like something like I language, E language. Bloomfield is an E-linguist approach to language teaching. Okay? So, how do we have language? B.F. Skinner said it is in the form of these two things. Stimulus, response. Stimulus, response. Stimulus, response. Okay, there is a stimulus and the result is a response. Okay? Let us see. When there is a stimulus, there is a response. Let us see. So, language, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Language is determined by stimuli. The plural form of stimulus is stimuli. So, stimulus is singular, stimuli is plural. Okay? So, language line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Language is determined by stimuli consisting of specific attributes of the situation and responses. Again, stimuli, responses. Stimuli, responses. The same thing. Whether it is singular or plural. Stimulus, response. Singular. Stimuli, responses. Plural, no difference. Okay? So, according to B.F. Skinner, language was like that. Let us see. Let us see that what happens to the idea that we have something like this. So, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 says, thus, the object doll acts as a stimulus, okay, for the child to respond doll. So, there's the object doll gives a stimulus to the child to produce something called doll. Something pronounced as doll. Okay? Which is reinforced, again, this kind of behavior in the child is reinforced by the parents. How? They say, clever girl, clever girl. Okay? Or by them handing the child doll. They just go and hand the child, not the pen, but the doll. Okay? So it is reinforced by saying something like clever girl, or by handing it to the child. Okay? It's like this. There's another example. The next line. Line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I am on page 51, paragraph 2, line 9. Or, the child feels thirsty. The child feels thirsty. The stimulus of milk deprivation. So she or he feels that she does not have milk. Deprived of milk, does not have milk. So, response by saying milk, and is reinforced by a glass of milk. So the child feels thirsty and says something like milk, and the father or the mother gives her or him something like milk. A glass of milk. So, language is only according to Bloomfield. Something like stimulus, response, like the doll example, or stimulus, response, as milk example. Okay? Now 3 lines to the bottom. As with Bloomfield, language originates from a physical need and is a means to a physical end. It's a kind of means to an end. Okay? So the parents' provision of reinforcement is because the parents have got something like reinforcement. This reinforcement is important too. It is important to the idea of language as represented by B.F. Skinner. So, all in all, both Bloomfield and B.F. Skinner have got the same idea. They say that language is a kind of behavior, and there is not something like inside. We do not have something like inside a thing about language. It is not an inside system for language. It is not something inside our brains, inside the mind, which actually does something like language. So language is only a kind of responses to our needs. So that's why we have something like audiolingualism in language teaching. Well, Chomsky attacks this position. Exactly, and says no, language is not like behaviorism. Let us see. Paragraph 3 actually says that Chomsky's classic critic of Skinner in his review is in the review of verbal behavior. Actually, Chomsky gives a review of B.F. Skinner's idea of language in which is published in 1959, as you see in this part. This is important. That what Chomsky here says is so important. Okay? So we said earlier, we said that we have language is creative. Okay? Line 3, creativity. So we say, line 2, chapter 1 here introduced the key Chomskyan notation of creativity. People regularly understand and produce sentences that they have never heard before. How come this is kind of behavior? It's something like creative. They are so creative, not something that they have heard before and or seen as a kind of, let's say, stimulus response. Well, people regularly, like 3 says, understand and produce sentences that they have never heard before. They have never heard before. Like what? Look at this sentence on line 4. Line 4. Demon faxed into solidity near Ada's home. Okay? Nobody hears this sentence up to the time it was produced in 2004. Okay? By Simmons, 2004. We can understand sentences that we have never heard before. Why? Because there is something inside our brains which decides that this is a new sentence. Which decides that this is a new sentence. This is a new idea. Which decides that this is, according to the grammar of English, it is a good sentence. But the idea is, in fact, something new. Well, there is something inside. How come, actually? Behaviorists say there is no such a thing inside your brain. Chomsky attacks this position. Okay? Okay? To take Chomsky's example, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Line 7, we say, you do not need to have experienced the situation before to take appropriate action. If someone says the volcano is erupting. The volcano is erupting. Okay? So to take Chomsky's example, you do not need to, in fact, have experienced the situation. You don't need to say that, well, in Iraq we don't have much, in fact, many, let's say, mountains, and some mountains have got fire outside. Iraqis simply understand that there is something called volcano, whether they have seen it or not seen it. Coming to Iranians, well, in Iran we have extinct, of course, volcanoes. But we have not actually seen the volcanoes in our ears, in our eyes. But we understand. Why? Simply because language permits us to do so. Why? Because it is creative. It is inside the mind's speaker. Okay? Inside the mind of the speaker. Okay? Now, because it is already long, I'm going to have I'm going to finish the behaviorism on the second audio file of mine. Thank you very much.